Good afternoon, everyone. First, let me thank Vin and his staff at MAS for putting together such a great summit. The next session, job creation and sustaining a diverse local green economy. We're bringing together a diverse group of individuals from the public, private, and academic sectors to help us answer some of the following questions. What are the real pockets of economic stimulation in the city? What are the new businesses creating jobs? What are the conditions in the built environment that foster this growth, and how do we encourage their development? At the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, we have struggled with the definition of a green job as part of our efforts to support clean energy goals and a green economy. One of the things that we have learned is that a green job is a local job. It does not necessarily have to be about weatherproofing or retrofitting or building solar panels. They are jobs that bring the consumer and the producer closer together. The production is more energy efficient and local materials prevail. Overall, they have the goal of reducing the carbon footprint. These fundamentals of a green economy cut across many different sectors, and it is particularly important for the city, for the future of New York City, that we understand this. As we've heard, New York City's economy is not just about Wall Street anymore. It's more diverse. There is great potential for low and middle wage jobs. So how can we support this new job ecosystem and make it as energy efficient as possible? What does it mean for zoning, urban planning, and for training our labor pool? Our distinguished panelists will illuminate the road ahead. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Yeohlee Teng, MAS board member and designer for her brand, Yeohlee. Miquela Craytor, Director of Industrial Initiatives for the New York City Economic Development Corporation. Deborah Johnson, Director, Pratt Design Incubator. David Kallick, Senior Fellow and Director of Immigration Research Initiative at the Fiscal Policy Institute, and Yorman Nunez from the a research fellow at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So, sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. And we want right now to thank the Rockefeller Brothers Fund for their support of MAS and for the support of this program and their interest in creating local green jobs. And that's a nice segue of what Ben said about the small carbon footprint. And I'll just take a moment of your time to tell you about my shop around the corner, which is on 38th Street in the heart of the Garment District, with a very small footprint because I manufacture locally. I am thrilled to be here today with all of you and with my esteemed panelists, because I am very intrigued at the opportunity of discovering how local jobs can be created that are green and sustainable and help our economy. I'd like to turn this over first to David, who is the Director of Immigration Research Initiative. David, your comments, please.
Thanks. So I was asked to talk about the role of immigrants in the New York City economy, which is a big topic. I normally do an hour presentation, and I'm going to do it in 3 minutes. So I'm not going to talk 20 times as fast, but I'm just going to give you two tidbits that I hope will be, two sort of ideas that I hope will be provocative. Oh, is it coming up? I see. I don't see it here. So if you look at the New York City population over the last, since 1950, which will give you some idea, sort of a rough, at a gross level, kind of an important indicator of how the city economy is doing. In the first 3 decades, so 1950, 1960, 1970, the population is pretty stable at about 8 million. So any of you who were here, who can remember it, who were here at the time, the 70s was a time of a big drop in population, white flight to the suburbs, the Bronx is burning, the blackout, right? There was a lot of problems in the city. And in fact, the city looked at the time like it was on a trajectory not very different from, say, Detroit or Buffalo or Cleveland. What's happened since then, and the mayor has in fact often stressed this himself, the population is back, right? Every decade it grew very strongly, pretty steadily, until today we're at actually a little bit over 8 million, a little bit higher than we were back in the 1950s and 60s. So I just want to show you what part of that is about immigration. This is the US-born population, so people who were born in the United States who live in New York City. In the 50s and 60s, it's going up a little bit until 1970. There's your big drop until 1980. But here's the surprise. right? The last 3 decades are in fact the same. The US-born population has not grown at all in the last in the same decades that we're talking about. The entire of New York City's population growth on net is due to immigrants, right? So there's the immigrant share in the 50s and 60s and 1970. It goes, the immigrant population stays about the same, in fact, but you see the drop because of the US-born population. And all of that growth we were talking about is a net growth in immigrants. So hold that thought. That's my thought number one. Today, the population is of the city, about 36%, 37% of the population were born in another country who are living here. So that's just the first generation immigrants, right? But 37% of the population, about 46% of the labor force, and about 48% of small business owners. So basically half of small business owners in New York City were born in another country. And that's the second thought I wanted to sort of leave you with. So about half of the small business owners are born in New York City. Were born in another country. This is the broad industries of the US-born population, and of course you can't read the details of what industries they are, but you can see that there's a concentration in that one group is professional services. This is the foreign-born overall, so much more evenly spread out throughout. A pretty big range though, and if you're interested, you can look on our website, of course. We have all the data about what industries are people in, but it's a pretty big spread. That's not necessarily what people would expect, and I think that's partly because this is all immigrants taken together. And immigrants in New York are an incredibly diverse group. So if you break it down by country of birth, what you see is the immigrants from China concentrated in retail, and I think that's leisure and hospitality, so restaurants, from the Dominican Republic. This is Korea, India. I know you're not going to follow exactly what you can see what's happening is a shifting around, right? In some cases it's retail, in some cases it's construction, in some cases it's restaurants. This is Greece, former Soviet Union. So that balanced picture we were seeing, Israel-Palestine, so the balanced picture we were seeing overall, and here's all business owners in New York City, is made up of these different pieces of immigration. And I think whenever you talk about immigration, you just have to keep in mind what a mixed group you're talking about. So let me leave you with those two thoughts, and hopefully we'll come back to it in conversation.
Terrific. Debera, Director for Design Incubator.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here and share a little bit about the work that we're doing and kind of the vision of creating green jobs in New York City that we have from our perspective. We have this opportunity, this challenge, in essence, to create new jobs, and it creates an opportunity to create the right kind of jobs that the world is in real need of new and innovative solutions that take care of the planet and take care of society. And I think that the Pratt Design Incubator is really interested in creating those types of jobs, and I think the city generally is interested in promoting that. And so when we say that, when we look at entrepreneurship, it's a very exciting time because of that need for innovation. The 4 dots that you're looking at on the screen really speak to what we're thinking about. So resource usage and how we're working with products, ecological impact, human health, what are the environmental health situations that we're creating in our homes, in our factories, and social equity. How can we create businesses and jobs that are really thinking about all 4 of those things, business, jobs, and products. And so I would say that design plays a huge role in this. I was talking with the VP of Marketing from Patagonia, a very environmentally focused company, and he said, 90% of design, or 90% of the impact of a product happens during the design stage. And that gives the designer a huge role. And while we're traditionally looking at function and form, and that was what design meant, we really are now changing that dialogue to add consequences into the mix. So if you're not talking about how it functions, what it looks like, and the consequences, then you're not really designing anymore. You're just creating more of the problem that we're trying to eliminate. And so we've got tools as designer, and this is an eco-strategy wheel that we're working with that really helps us work with small business to examine what they're doing and how they might change what they're doing, whether it's through product innovation or optimizing manufacturing, lean manufacturing, you may have heard that term, optimizing the lifetime, understanding what's going to happen to it at the end of its life. And so we are working at the incubator as a design and extension service with various companies to help them have that conversation. In that way, we start to create green jobs. And then this is the Pratt Design Incubator, just a little snapshot of who we are. We started in 2002, one business at a time. 2005, we started to have about 3 businesses. We're now, as of about a month ago, up to 18 businesses in clean energy products, product design, fashion design, as well as design consulting, kind of all with this sort of triple bottom line philosophy that we care about a viable business that can bring economic success and livelihood, as well as sustainable values, the environmental consequences, the social consequences, really mixed into the business model, not added on later because it doesn't work there. This is an urban bikewear company. The D'Argello is just one of the companies in the incubator. Solar Ivy is a product that's doing architectural products for solar. So he's got this ivy that goes up buildings and this sort of tent that you can do complex structures. And this is our manifesto. We're working a lot with young creative people, and this is our philosophy of what we feel and how we feel they should be taking life on. And these are the people whose hearts are so in what they're doing that they will always be attached to their businesses. And that's what makes them really a great local resource. They're low-tech businesses that want to produce in New York, they want to live in Brooklyn, and they want to live their lives through their products and bringing their products out through New York City.
Awesome.
Great. Do you need the?
Yorman, Research Fellow, MIT.
Thank you. My name is Yorman Nunez. I'm a research fellow at MIT, and I coordinate an initiative in the Bronx called the Bronx Cooperative Development Initiative. We're an effort that seeks to harness local assets in the borough to develop wealth, ownership, and business leadership amongst low-income residents in the Bronx. And right now, what we're doing is we're in the process of identifying assets that strategically make sense to leverage now. And we've identified 3 so far. The stable procurement streams of large anchor institutions in the borough, the pension funds and political power of organized labor organizations in the borough, and the community benefit spending dollars of large nonprofit hospitals in the borough. And I actually don't have enough time to go through all of them, so I'll go through the first because I think it paints the clearest picture, which is the stable procurement streams of our anchor institutions. So what we've done is we've begun a process of building relationships with anchors in the Bronx, and we've identified 12. And what we're doing is conducting an analysis on their purchasing budgets, seeing how much they purchase altogether, collectively, how much of it gets spent in the Bronx, how much of it gets spent in the region, and then how much of it gets spent elsewhere. And looking at what gets spent elsewhere, what of those goods and services can be produced locally in the Bronx? So simultaneously, as we're doing this analysis, we've forged a relationship, a deep relationship with the Mondragon Corporation. Mondragon is the largest network of worker-owned cooperatives in the world. They're the 7th largest business group in Spain. They have over 80,000 worker owners. They've been around almost 60 years, and despite all of the economic trends, they have not laid off a single worker owner. So to us, they're a real successful example of employee ownership succeeding and of economic democracy. And what we've done is looked at all the things that they make. And for all the products that they make, there's a certain number that if we can aggregate that amount, justifies them building a manufacturing plant in the Bronx to provide, to sell those goods. And that manufacturing plant is not just any manufacturing plant, it would be a worker-owned manufacturing plant where people are building equity that's stable, that won't just disappear in 5 or 10 years, right? And what we're about, although this is really exciting, and this is not the only way we're looking at harnessing procurement, by the way. I just don't have enough time to go through everything else. But we're not just about cutting deals. We're not just about building worker-owned cooperatives, right? We don't think just because we're building employee-owned businesses that will revitalize our community, right? What we're about is developing our capacity of local stakeholders to really influence economic development in our borough so that it's not dominated by outside interests. So what's hidden within all this is partners in the borough that have a history of not working well together, right? Business development organizations, community-based organizations, a lot of these anchor institutions, et cetera, who don't work well enough together. And throughout this process, we've built a table where they are together, they are co-developing it and building a formal institution with the capacity to do deals like what I just mentioned, intentionally. So that there's a space where we can all come together and do that intentionally in our borough and really influence development. So right now we're in the phase of doing that, and we're very optimistic that we will succeed in those efforts.
Miquela?
Sure.
Director of Industrial Initiatives, EDC.
Thanks. Well, I'm excited to be here. There's so much I could talk about, so I'll also kind of focus my comments about really what we're trying to do at EDC in terms of creating the sort of windows of opportunity for job creation. One of the things that I've had the opportunity as someone who was previously on the other side of the table, formerly running a nonprofit in the South Bronx, one of the biggest frustrations I had was that there was so many different ways we'd like to see our government agencies act on behalf of groups on the grassroots level that we never saw them doing, whether it was a policy shift that would create the demand in a new workforce, a policy shift that would create the demand for greener materials or goods. And so that's one of the exciting things that, where I'm currently working, in the small little world I am in within New York City EDC, I am trying to have an impact. We have a new set of 22 industrial initiatives, and several of those are really about creating that demand. One of the big things that I think we can all do a lot better when we're in positions of government is trying to signal to the private sector where you can have stability and confidence to grow your business. That's the biggest thing that I've learned, that companies, especially manufacturers and other types of industrial firms, they oftentimes are waiting to see what's going to happen in the policy arena, and because they're not certain, they limit their investment, and that limited investment means they're not hiring. So one of the key roles that we're trying to do within our 22 initiatives is create certain signals to the marketplace. So we have a new food manufacturing fund we're about to start, where we're trying to give loans to food manufacturers. What we did is we did a bit of research to understand what are the impediments to growth, and that's why we partnered with Goldman Sachs to help create and establish a $10 million fund. Another way we're doing that is we recently, as of today, just launched a New York's Next Top Makers competition to help establish an opportunity for folks who have product ideas but need support to conceive that idea into commercialization. And so one of the key roles I think government is trying to do, at least where I'm working in the city of New York, is trying to take a step where we're understanding where the impediments to growth and success of business, and try to play the best role to foster business growth and expansion. So those are just a few highlights.
Thank you. Now I have a question, and it's for the whole group. Where are the new jobs coming from? And any of you can address that. Which sector?
Well, I'll just take a quick stab. In terms of manufacturing, we saw a great amount of growth in the food manufacturing sector. I mean, in Brooklyn, and actually some of the other boroughs as well, food manufacturing is actually one of the portions of manufacturing that seems to be in the positive end. Most folks, when they talk about manufacturing, they say about bringing it back onshore. Well, the exciting part in New York is that there's a lot of people already doing it. It's not even about bringing what was overseas back. It's about getting out of their kitchen and then going to a commercial kitchen. So that's one area of growth. We also are seeing a lot.
What do they make?
Food products.
Food.
Yeah, but we're also seeing it in other products. I mean, Deb's work, as well as some of the other types of incubators out there.
I would say what you're looking at is where sort of low-tech fabrication, things that are easy entry. So food production, you can actually start and prototype and develop your business in your own kitchen, not necessarily legally, but then you move into commercial kitchens. Furniture fabrication, fashion design is a huge growth in our incubator. But one of the big challenges that these small companies have is scaling. They all face the scale challenge. So I think what's important is to look for ways to help them over that gap. So one of the things we're doing is starting a small run production center for fashion designers in New York City that is really designed not for making 500, but making 25 of something so that they can succeed.
I mean, if I could say I think that's, you're saying within manufacturing, that's where there are jobs, but most, unfortunately, I think, and this is a big challenge for the city going forward, that a lot of where the jobs are being created now are in retail and in restaurants and in home health care.
Are you able to give us percentages?
If you want to ask me,
I'm interested.
Not off the top of my head, but we have had reports at Fiscal Policy Institute to look at that. And the concern is that those are areas where it's great that they're growing, but we'd like to see some improvement in the job quality because those are often very low-wage jobs, and there's a lot of loss of middle-wage jobs historically, especially in manufacturing, and those jobs are being replaced by low-wage jobs. They don't need to be low-wage jobs, but that's the reality.
Well, are new jobs created in the low-wage sector? I mean, is it a 50% of the new jobs, or is it like 20%?
I would say that those kind of low-wage jobs are most of the growth. Most of the net growth recently has been in those kind of low-wage jobs.
So almost 80%?
we have real numbers, and I don't have them at the top of my head, so I'd be happy to get back to you about it. But it's the large majority. There's not much growth in the middle right now, and this is this sort of squeezed middle is a story that I think we've gotten some.
So Miquela, what can the city do to respond to that?
Well, I mean, I can speak about my piece of the puzzle. We released a report last year, our industrial study, and identified that 15% of the private sector workforce is in the industrial sectors. That includes manufacturing, which most times when people hear industrial, they just assume it's all manufacturing. We actually define it more broadly. It includes distribution, wholesale trade, transportation, and construction. For the transportation and construction fields, we actually see positive trends and growth and stability. Again, manufacturing overall, taken as a whole, has seen more negative, been on the downward slope. But within that whole, there are certain segments like food manufacturing that are on the positive side. But in total, it's been more on the downward side. We are just seeing pockets of growth within each sort of subsector. But like I said, construction and transportation fields are growing. And so one of the things we're trying to do to support that growth is, again, we have a couple of programs. We have we've recently started this called Future Focus, where we're taking businesses, giving them assistance to develop growth plans. Because one of the biggest challenges to some of our older companies in New York City is that many of them have not updated if they even have a business plan. They started their company, that sort of, have a friend, have an idea, let's launch the business, and been very successful, but they reach a certain point where it's no longer stable. And they oftentimes think, I need to buy a new piece of equipment that will help me grow. When in fact, they haven't necessarily developed a bigger systemic look at their business. And maybe they're getting the loan, but they're not putting it in the right place. So one of the things we're trying to do through our programs is really help businesses look holistically about their company so that they can plan and plan for future growth in the most positive way.
And you just have to look at what can afford to be in the city, and those are the companies that need to be near, essentially, their consumers, and where they're, you're not going to get a big transportation or auto company moving into the city. That doesn't make sense. So there are the things that can kind of be built and used close to the city that are, in terms of the industry, that are developing and growing. And the service sector becomes that other area.
I really want to echo what David said. See, we're focused on building wealth and ownership amongst low-income residents in the Bronx, right? And I think that question sort of speaks a little bit to how economic development is done in general, at least in the Bronx, where it's about jobs and more jobs. And the discussion on the table a lot in the Bronx is any job a good job, right? We think the businesses, right, of the future are businesses that root wealth in their place, not ship it off somewhere else. And what we're trying to do is develop jobs that do that root wealth in the borough. So and most of the forecast and a lot of what I hear about the new jobs that are coming are not jobs that develop wealth for their employees, are not jobs that really have triple bottom lines, that are generative of the local economy.
Can you quickly cite an example of what you are trying to create that would build wealth, like the kind of business it could be and how it would affect your community?
We could essentially, like for example, one of the things we're looking at, right, is the procurement budgets of these large anchor institutions. Let's say, one of the things is food, lettuce. This is actually big thing in New York City already, right? Our lettuce right now, we have the largest food distribution center in the world, in the Bronx. Let's just say that. So lettuce comes to the borough, then gets shipped off to New Jersey, chopped, washed, then comes back and shipped off to everywhere else that it's gonna go to, right? Can we develop an enterprise, right, that does that locally, because we can, right? We does that locally, and can that enterprise be employee-owned so that people actually develop wealth? And can it provide access to those? Can it not just provide? Can it not just be in the wholesale market? Can it provide that stuff to fresh lettuce and stuff like that to people in the community? And can they get their lettuce from somewhere in the metropolitan area that's locally grown and stuff like that? So that type of enterprise sort of tackles on a lot of the issues that were going in the Bronx.
So what would it take? I'm sorry. What would it take to get that started?
There's a host of challenges that we can talk about.
Well, let's just spell it out. Yeah.
I think right now there needs to be more of a systemic approach to how we're doing economic development. Right now, what we've done is brought together a multi-stakeholder group of folks: business talent, business development talent, entrepreneurial talent, government, our agencies, community-based organizations, et cetera, to really think about developing this type of system, because that's really, it's more than just an enterprise. It's really a system that we're creating that generates wealth and roots it inside. So what you really need is a multi-stakeholder group of folks to look at this system from all different angles and harness our own resources to do that. So one of us could do the analysis. Some of us with business talent can actually train folks, build a workforce development pipeline, right? We got a lot of workforce development organizations on board. We have a lot of food experts, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really about harnessing what we already have to create that system.
But do we need to answer the question about where does the money come from?
Yeah, the money can come from a host of different folks. There's a lot of social investors out there. Our city, our EDC has a lot of information on where we can figure out how to leverage funding and where can we gain capital from. Capital formation is a challenge in general. Right. So any business you want to create, anything you want to do around economic development, access to capital is a challenge in general. So I don't know if I can just answer easily where we can get it, but it is one of those challenges that we just have to overcome.
I think one of the biggest challenges that confronts enterprises such as what you described is patient capital. I really think we need a new model for financing projects like this. And I'm saying this not wearing my city hat. This
You're
is
doing
my
the best
own.
you can.
Exactly.
But David, I cut you off. Oh, sorry.
No, I really think we need a whole new, and there thankfully are more investors out there willing to do that and are more socially minded and environmentally minded, but we really need to make that what we expect of those folks, of those institutions, and demand it not only as consumers in terms of where we put our dollar and what we buy, but also in terms of what we're trying to advocate for when we invest our 401ks or otherwise.
Right, and I did want to give you the opportunity to, you were going to jump in.
I was just to say, I think that paying attention to job quality and not just having jobs is, I think, hugely important and has the obvious benefit for, the people who have those jobs, but a lot of flow through for the city, right? You have lower expenses than on different kinds of services. You have people have money in their pockets so that not only are they then they can fuel the next business. I think there's a lot of positive feedback and sustainability in that. And I think it's great to think about new models and new sectors and diversifying the economy, which is hugely important. I also think we shouldn't just assume that it's inevitable that the jobs that have been low-paying jobs are going to continue to be low-paying jobs. Right. And I think that's been, we talked a little bit about this in the garment industry. In the 1950s, those were actually middle-class, well-paying jobs, right? And that deteriorated over time. There's no reason in Las Vegas today, retail jobs, well, especially, I guess, service sector jobs, have gotten to be very good jobs. And there's no reason that couldn't be true in New York as well. Yeah.
And to sum up, I could say that everyone present can also help, because if you buy local and you pay attention to not just who designed your clothes, but who made them and where it was made, it would help all of us.
And you could invest in the Bronx, too.
Yes. Exactly. Thank you so much.
Thank you.